I do think God calls us to be excellent. I do think God wants the best for us. And I do think he wants us not to be lazy. So I do want to encourage them to do good things, to dream big, to be great. But if they fail and they don't get it, I don't want them to identify with their failure. Their failure is not them. It's okay to make mistakes, and that's a good thing. And I didn't grow up in that atmosphere in this business. It's very much like, if you're failing, you're a failure. You're not going to make it. So I consciously try to not do that in my kids. I want them to be secure. I want them to feel so confident in themselves that they don't need any sort of external validation. They're confident in me as their parent, that I will love them no matter what. I'll be there for them. And that's a reflection ultimately of God. And that's the goal, right? As a parent, to try to be that reflection.
September 13th, daily prayer. For it is by his grace you are saved. Through trusting him, it is not your own doing. It is God's gift, not a reward for work done. There is nothing anyone to boast of. Ephesians 2:8-9. Lord our God, we know that we are your children, and in this certainty we gather in your presence as a community. Grant us your spirit, the spirit who works in us and frees us from the many evils that still torment us. Be with us and let the power of your great grace and mercy be in our hearts, so that we may gain the victory and lead joyful lives on earth in spite of our many shortcomings, blunders, and sins. For your grace is great, much greater than all our failings. You are our God and Father, and we want to keep our conscience clear today and always through your grace. Amen.
You gotta support me. You gotta support me. Respect my mind. Don't respect my mind. The drugs, the dealers, the guns, the killers, the boxes in the ring, the thriller in Manila, the hood, the block, the voice of the ghetto, the all-around hustler, neighborhood fella, the keys, the trap, the bank, the stacks, the money in the pot, the hand that shoot the craps, the pain, the struggle, the ways to adapt, the point you fell off at, the moment you bounce back. I am the rules, so stick to the code. I am the karma, so
What's up, guys? RNG here from the Stone Vet USMC. Happy Friday. Yeah, I know these episodes are coming out a little bit later, but they're actually coming out on Friday at least still, right? They're still coming out on Friday. As soon as I get done recording this, I'll do all my editing, get it uploaded, and I'll have you guys over on YouTube, on Spotify, iHeartRadio, iTunes, Pandora, Stitcher. However you listen to this podcast, it'll be there for you today, so you can listen to it during your lunchtime maybe, or maybe you can listen to it after work on your way home from work. Good to hang out with SRNG for a little bit before you go back and get into the life that there is after work, right? It's been a crazy week. It's been interesting, dude. It's been real interesting week this week, man. I met somebody new through text message. She apparently was texting the wrong person, and then we've been talking back and forth. But it hasn't been. I haven't been rude. I haven't been vulgar like I tend to be, right, when I start talking to people. I've just been listening, trying to learn how to listen, right? That's one of our biggest struggles as veterans, that we hate to listen. We just want to talk, and we hate to listen about what's going on with other people's lives. But it's been an interesting week this week, meeting this lady. I mean, she's got a sad story. Both her parents passed away. Her husband passed away due to COVID, and I mean, but she's doing awesome freaking things. She's making it, dude. She lives out in LA and she's making it. Like, I mean, she wasn't shy to share her bank account information with me, and she's actually trying to get me into. I've been trying to learn about Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin's apparently the way to go right now, right? Especially with the stock market and the way everything's going. And she's like trying to get me on board to start doing this Bitcoin trading with her. And I'm just like, I really want to do this. I really want to do this, but everything comes with a price, right? And I was like, no, I got the money. I swear I got the money. I've got to move stuff around so I can get the money. I have it. I just got to. And then it's just like risk and reward and data. And now, I got to psych myself up and everything. So, I mean, it's been interesting, right? She's been a really cool person. We haven't been hitting on each other, which has been great, because that's usually what I do when I start talking to women, right? Like, I'm a fucking idiot. But I have not been hitting on her. I've not been talking to her inappropriately, sexually. just talking like two normal human beings do, like I do at work, just talking, not nothing, getting to learn each other a little bit more and more every day. But it's been interesting. It's been interesting, man. But she seems really cool. Like she really wants to help me learn about this Bitcoin trading, and I really want to know about it, right? I really want to learn about it. So I just got to go and just be able to just do it, right? Just do it. That's the biggest thing, is just doing it, right? And she's like, there's a reward. She's like 33, 38% reward on it. And I'm like, she's not lying to me, right? Like she could have been like, no, it's 100% reward, or 80% or whatever. But she's like, no, it's about 33% reward on investment, return on investment. And I'm like, I really need to get on this because I got bills I got to pay, dude. If I learn how to do it, then I could be good with it, right? Because that's all of us, though, right? That's all of us on a regular basis. It's like, how do we do this? How do we do this? I need to make more money. I need to figure this out. And it's all about learning and meeting, networking, meeting new people, right? And that's what's one thing I do is I meet a lot of people. And I'm excited, right? So I'm excited to get on this journey with her and learn how to do this, right? I was like, she's like, this weekend's supposed to be good. I was like, I can't get it this weekend. But I said, I got to talk to my financial advisor, have her move some money for me so that I can jump in and get ready to do this type of stuff, right? So hopefully you guys, I've been noticing that there's a crap load more downloads, which I truly appreciate. There was a crap load more downloads as soon as I finished last week's episode, right? Because I didn't shoot an episode for a week. I shot last week's episode and I had a whole bunch of downloads, which I was like, wow, I guess people are really listening. And I do appreciate you guys that are listening in from across the world, around the world, taking time out of your day to come over here, hang out with the Stone Vet, see what I got to say, right? We're still going through this book, right? The Insanity of God. We're still going through this book here, right? We're on chapter 7 this week. Chapter 7 this week's called Take My Baby. 2 decades later, Ruth and I found ourselves confronting overwhelmingly need in Somalia. We distributed international aid and explored new areas in need of relief as others joined our small team. One of the core members of our growing team was a young man named JB. He and I agreed to go on a scouting expedition into South Central Somalia. This was an area that had not been seen outside visitors for so many years. One town we approached looked like an abandoned ghost town. Lifeless houses, darkened windows, dust blowing across empty streets. As soon as we appeared, however, a swarm of humanity poured out of homes and storefronts. Hundreds of emaciated villagers filled the streets, and the sound of alarmed and raised voices. I looked over my shoulder. To my horror, I saw my own hired security men cruising in Somali and swinging their rifle butts to ward off those in the surging mob who were trotting alongside and trying to reach over the sides of the truck to take our food supplies, right? So you got to remember, right? If you remember watching Black Hawk Down, right? You remember what that was like for those guys that were just taking the resources, dude. They weren't trying to help anybody. They were only worried about themselves. And so they were taking the militants were taking the resources for them, right? They didn't want to help the people that lived there. And as a missionary, that's what he's doing, right? He said he went to Somalia, right? Why the heck would you want to go to? I don't know, dude. I've been to Iraq, been to Kuwait, and it's like that, right? There ain't nothing out there. There's not a freaking thing. Some farmers with some sheep. But like to see that, right? To see that firsthand, to actually see how these people are living, right? They don't have water. They don't have food. They don't have resources. They have nothing, like absolutely nothing. Have you guys ever been in a situation where you have absolutely nothing? You don't know where your next meal is going to come from. You don't have enough money to turn on the electricity in your house. You're hoping you don't freeze out because it's so cold outside. And this is what he's saying, right? Going here to provide these resources for these citizens of Somalia, and his bodyguards are butt stroking people because they're like, get away from me, get away from me, get away from me, right? He said, my initial instinct was to protest my men's violent reaction toward the very people who he had come to help. But my frustration with our guards almost instantly turned to utter dismay, as I realized that many of the people surrounding us were not determined to take our supplies. They were instead attempting to give us the most precious thing that they had. I knew enough Somalia to understand the mother frantically running beside us, crying and begging, take my baby. All my other children have died. Please save this one. She tried to thrust her infant through my open passenger window. As I sat in shock, my driver reached across and hurriedly cranked up my window to prevent any other mothers from dropping starving babies into my lap. Like that right there, dude. Imagine that feeling of hurt. All her other babies have died, and all she has is this one baby left, and she thinks the only thing that would be the best thing for this baby is to put it in a visitor's lap and hope that they will take care of the baby for you. It's like adoption, dude. If you guys don't know, yeah, I've had 2 biological children. Me and my wife were able to have 2 biological children, and we've adopted 5 of our children, right? I don't care who you are, dude. These are my biological kids. I don't care what you think or what you say. All these children are my children, regardless if we had them biologically or not. They are my kids, dude. Don't ever think that they're not my kids. They are my babies. Every one of them are my babies, right? Because this understanding the struggle of adoption, dude, it's the same, similar if you ever try to have kids. It's the same thing, dude, regardless. It's a different situation, but it's the same outcome, waiting and seeing, and hopefully it took this time. Hopefully somebody saw us, or somebody wants us, it's a struggle too, dude. Adoption is a struggle as well as having a baby biologically, dude. He said our driver accelerated through the crowd. Somehow we avoided running over any townspeople. Only when we were several miles out of town did we stop and debrief what had happened. On the one hand, it was clear that we might have been killed for the food and fuel that we had. On the other hand, I was overwhelmed with the desperation of those mothers. I wondered what I would have done if it was my family that was starving. Would I consider giving away my son if that was the only possible way that he would live? The question haunted me. I mean, think about it, dude. How would that make you feel? I got to give my kid up so he can survive, because I'm not going to be able to help my kid survive here in the situation that we're currently living in. Think about how hard that would be, dude. Just give up your kid just so you know that your kid will have a meal tonight to eat and a bed to sleep in and water to drink. Our team was better prepared when we entered the next village. From then on, we entered inhabited towns only after sundown. Under the cover of darkness, we would find an abandoned building where we could set up camp out of sight. Early the next morning, we would leave the drivers and some of the guards with our hidden vehicles, and a few of us would hike to the middle of town, to a busy gathering place there, without our food or vehicles serving as a distraction or temptation. We could carry on conversations with people regarding the area's recent history and inquire about its most serious needs. Once we gathered the information we needed, we could usually hike back to the vehicles without attracting more than a small following of young children who would watch us speed out of town before the rest of the community ever saw our vehicles and supplies. As we traveled further, we encountered only more heartache. Some villages were completely empty. Evidently, entire populations had simply abandoned their homes and fled for their lives. JB and I found another village by following a trail of decomposed bodies. Many just skeletons lying alongside the road. I think we gained a measure of appreciation and loyalty from our Muslim staff for stopping and showing respect for the dead by digging shallow graves and providing a very simple but religiously essential proper burial for each of the first few scattered bodies we encountered. But the closer to the village we got, the more bodies there were. We simply didn't have the time or the energy to bury them all. I vividly remember JB kneeling in the sandy soil, scraping out a small depression with a bayonet, wrapping what was left of a bony body in rags, gently laying the shell of a starved Somali in the hole, piling sand and rocks on top, then removing his cap to say a prayer over the man's body. This is a scene that I can still see today. Our Muslim guards watching a white man from America respectfully burying and praying over their dead. It is a powerful image, no doubt. it was also a transcending witness. I mean, for those of you that have deployed, you guys know what this is like. You know what it's like when you see some of these people just starving and dying, dude, and you're just like, golly, I can't even do nothing to help these people. All I can do is bury the body and pray for them, and may God have rest on their soul, right? It's a struggle, dude. It is. It can be very, very hard, man. And this guy's just a disciple. He's not even a freaking military guy. He's just a disciple of Christ, doing God's work. There are times, I know you guys that were in Afghanistan and Iraq, there were times where this is some of the things you had to do. You had to carry your battle buddy back to the Humvee so they can get sewn up or whatever. And this guy's doing it just because the Lord asked him to do it, right? It's a lot. When we found our way to an eerily silent and empty cluster of huts, we began to understand what had happened there. The bodies that we had been finding and burying along the road evidently belonged to the men of this village, on the verge of starvation, husbands, fathers, and brothers, who felt that they were still strong enough, or maybe just desperate enough, to set out in search of help for their dying families and neighbors. Most of them hadn't made it very far. Don't sound like it, right? The loved ones that they had left behind fared no better and probably didn't live much longer. The lush green around the village gave it the deceiving feel of a tropical paradise. Birds were singing and flowers bloomed. The silent grass-roofed huts of typical African stick and wattle construction told a different story, however. The rough structure showed the wear of several seasons past clear evidence of their abandonment many months, if not years earlier. The scenes inside the huts were even more haunting. What used to be a family home were now unsealed tombs. In one hut, we discovered the bodies of two girls about the age of my sons. One of the children lay in a bed, her hand holding a brush still entangled in her hair. It was as if she had died wanting to look her best. Her little sister sat slumped over on the dirt floor beside the withered remains of an old granny who was still holding an old spoon that she had been using to stir what looked like green grass in a soup pot. That sad setting looked almost posed, as if part of some surrealistic tableau of death, with the subjects engaged in the most basic daily chores, right where they had lived their lives and where they evidently had waited together for death. Imagine seeing that, walking into one of these houses, one of these huts, and everybody in there is dead like that. Like, did she die really brushing her hair? This old woman really died cooking? Taken to the scene, they seemed to be nothing to say. Walking back toward our vehicle, one of the Somali staffers sighed deeply and soberly, offered a poignant observation. You know, Dr. Nik, he said, they used to call Somalia a third world country, but now we are a pre-world country. The emotional anguish that I heard in his voice was heart-wrenching. Our expedition continued from village to village, many completely abandoned or inhabited only by the dead. Most of the people we found alive were just barely alive. It was clear from the emptiness in their eyes that they had lost all hope. One village was full of grieving parents whose children had all gotten sick and died. We had nothing to offer them to ease their sadness and pain. Then a few days later, we found another village where the adults had all died of starvation after giving their very last of their food to keep their children alive. We transported the orphans from the second village back to the first village and pray that there might be some solace in the instantly reconstituted families recreated there. 2 weeks into our trip, we were still hoping to reach more villages. However, the locals warned us the roads ahead had been lined with landmines to limit the movement of opposing clans. The only safe way to go any further south or west, we were told, would be to stay off the roads and drive up the riverbeds. Since this was the rainy season, that too was a dangerous proposition. At that point, we gave up our hope of completing a more extensive survey of southern Somalia. We left most of the supplies at a leper colony and departed for the coastal city of Kismayo. We knew of a sister relief agency there that could help us make our way back to Mogadishu. From there, we returned to Nairobi, where we shared our heart-rending findings with representatives of the international disaster and relief community. When I traced out our route on a map to show where we had traveled, which villages had been abandoned, where we had found people alive, and where the desperate survivors were closest to starvation, the international coalition seemed grateful for the information. They told us that our exploration party represented the 5 outsiders who had been in that part of Somalia since the Civil War and had begun in 1988, 4 years earlier. What was most discouraging about the meeting was the immediate conclusion that because of the dangerous conditions and the distance from Mogadishu, there was no way to establish distribution sites for an international response. In the area that we had surveyed, those at the meeting did, however, agree to provide some resources through airdrops, where planes could fly low and slow over inhabited areas and literally drop bags of food and basic medical supplies into the empty fields near the most desperate communities. So they said that they couldn't go in there, but they could do airdrops, though. But we all know about what happens with these airdrops, right? The pirates, whoever, the bad guys there in Somalia will go and take it. Take it from the people who are needing, who are dying from starvation, right? I was frustrated that we couldn't do more, but I was encouraged knowing that our efforts would at least do some good. And that encouragement lasted until I heard about one of the first airdrop missions. Evidently, well-intentioned relief workers made the mistake of informing the people in one village of the day and time of the drop. Having seen how the people swarmed and surrounded our trucks, I could imagine the scene on the ground as the roar of plane engines approached. What I could not imagine was the tragedy that occurred next. The townspeople poured onto the field and in their excitement attempted to catch the huge bags of wheat, rice, and corn that came tumbling out of the back of the plane, passing 100 feet overhead. Scores were injured and some were killed trying to catch the relief supplies being airdropped to save their lives. With despair, I once again cried out, how can anybody even help to make things better in a place like Somalia? One single failure of forethought can turn a good attempt into a tragedy. What are we doing here? Sometimes the problem is not the simple naivety of well-meaning people. Sometimes the problem is the evil that would twist the best intentions into indescribable tragedy. One morning, our team delivered a truckload of food and basic healthcare supplies to a small, shabby, war-ravaged village. We saw the anticipation of the faces of the starving children as we measured out each family's allotment of food and presented it to the mothers. We saw hope resurrected in grateful eyes of parents who finally had reason to believe that they might be able to save their children. We returned home, pleased with what we had done, knowing that we made a difference. Sometime later, we learned the rest of the story. Several days after we had been there, a neighboring clan attacked and overran the poor village that we had fed. After cursing and vilifying the poor villages for having the audacity to accept our relief aid before those who deserved it more had received their share, the invaders stole what was left. Before leaving, the attackers abused the women and girls of the village and then tortured the helpless and humiliated men. I felt physically sick when I heard what had happened, but I felt far worse when I learned that the villagers who we had tried to help were warning people in their other nearby villages. You better not take any food for those people. They will get you killed. My anger raged at an evil that could twist our best intentions into the wicked weapon and then blame us for the resulting pain. I realized that it is a dangerous enemy who can inflict deep wounds to the hearts and bodies of both those grieving and receiving aid in a place like Somalia. I mean, think about that, guys. They said they're going to kill these people for getting the supplies that they need to survive because they're dying of starvation. That's like one of the worst ways to die, is dying through starvation. And these guys are coming and taking these resources that are being given to these villagers who are struggling, right? These people are literally struggling just to get by day. And these people are taking the resources from them, right? He says, I dealt with shock every time I entered or left Somalia. It was like traveling to another planet, except that the trip took only a few hours. Going into Somalia was like stepping into the world of the Old Testament. In Somalia, I would wake up in an insane and hostile place, a hell in the grip of evil, a world without enough food to make it habitable, a world where children could not go to school and where few of them lived until puberty, a world where parents did not expect to watch their children to grow to adulthood. And then perhaps that very evening in Nairobi, I would go to bed in a different, saner world, a world that seemed more like heaven, where my wife and 3 sons celebrated my return at a family meal with some special dessert. This different, sane world was a place where my boys attended school, where I would referee their basketball games, where we had doctors and hospitals, where we had lights and electricity and running water and grocery stores and gas stations and so much more. I simply could not reconcile the fact that I was living, right? I was living in 2 different worlds that were located not only on the same planet, but on the same continent in neighboring countries. I'm not certain that it was a healthy way to handle the disconnect, but I eventually learned how to flip a mental switch the moment my plane lifted off in Somalia. I'm headed home to Ruth and the boys. I would tell myself then I would slowly let down my defenses and relax. In the same way, I would flip the mental switch whenever I took off in the other direction. I'm returning to the other world again, I would tell myself. My senses would instinctively go into hyper alert status in order to focus once more on the challenges of working, living, and staying alive in Somalia. That transition wasn't always quite so instantaneous. The reconciliation of my 2 worlds was not quite complete. I came to realize this whenever I found myself having 2 almost opposite emotional responses to the most common kinds of family interactions. For example, if I overheard my boys arguing, I would feel indignation begin to swell inside, and I would want to lecture them about how grateful they should be to live in Kenya instead of Somalia, where most of the children their age had died or were on the verge of death. At other times, and sometimes just seconds later, I would look at my sons and I would suddenly feel so blessed and overwhelmed by the emotion that I would begin to weep. I would want to snatch them up in a bear hug and smoother them with kisses. And smother them with kisses, right? I mean, think about that, guys. When you're looking at it, right, you're looking at all this stuff and you're looking at how these families are living. You're like, and you look at your kids, you're like, you spoiled, rotten freaking brats, dude. You guys got food. You got a bed to sleep in. You got running water. You can go to the grocery store and get what you need, right? And I'm going over here and watching these families struggle to get a freaking piece of food in their bellies. Struggles to get a drink of water so that they're not dying from thirst, right? At this time, I had made dozens of trips into and out of Somalia, staying in country from a few days to several weeks at a time. We tried not to worry the boys with details about what we were doing, but they were certainly aware of the situation in Somalia. And like, if you're a disciple, right? I've got a brother of mine. He's getting ready to take his whole family overseas to be disciples. And when you see stuff like that, that's something you're like, I don't really want to scare my kids with it. But they do need to be made aware of it to know this is why we're doing what we're doing. We're doing God's work is what we're trying to do. We're trying to have them believe in something stronger and bigger than what they are, regardless of the situation that they're in right now, right? Because they're in a horrible situation. But to let them know that God loves them and God will provide for them, and to provide hope like that. Like, you feel like I can say all these things, right? And not have anything to prove it and show for it, right? But God will provide, right? He said, after my survey trip to southern Somalia, however, having been reminded of how dangerous our work was, I felt the need to hold a serious family conference to share something close to my heart. Ruth and I gathered the boys. Shane was 13, Timothy was 11, and Andrew was 6. I looked at my sons and I said, boys, when we lived back in America, even before you were born, your mama and I had to answer a very important question. Were we willing to live our lives for Jesus? You know that your mama made that decision as a little girl. And you've heard me tell the story of how I was 18 before I decided that I would follow Jesus and live my life for him. Then before your mama and I got married, we made certain that we agreed and we decided that we were willing to live for Jesus together as a couple and as a family. Later, when we were thinking about being overseas workers, we had to answer another important question. Were we willing to go with Jesus? Were we willing to go with Jesus and live our lives for him in another part of the world? We came to live in Africa after we said another yes to that question. Now we've come to live in Kenya so we can take food and medicine to help and save the lives of many thousands of people, children, parents, entire families who live in Somalia. The reason we do this is to show God's love to the Somali people who have never had a chance to know about Jesus and his love for them. But because those Somalis live in a country that is such a hard, dangerous, and bad place right now, your mama and I have to answer another very difficult question. We have always said that we were willing to live for Jesus. Then we decided that we would go with Jesus. We've said yes to both of those questions. But now we have to ask ourselves, are we willing to die for Jesus? We didn't want to frighten our sons. We made certain that they knew that we did not expect to die. They knew that we certainly didn't want to die. We assured them that we would take every precaution that we could to protect ourselves. But after experiencing the conditions in Somalia and understanding the stakes, we wanted them to understand the seriousness of the situation. We wanted them to know just how important Ruth and I believed it was to do what we felt Jesus had called our family to do. We were not really wanting our young sons to be willing for their dad to die. Rather, we wanted them to let Jesus reign. We wanted them to trust Jesus with every detail of our lives. As determined as we were to be obedient, it's a good thing that we didn't know then what that commitment would mean in the months and years ahead. If we had known what was coming, I'm not all sure that I would have had enough faith at that point to make the choice to stay the course. Interesting, right? That's how you finish the chapter. Some questions that I can continue to tell you guys that you guys need to ask yourselves. Are you willing to live for Christ? He asked it here, right? He said, am I willing to die for Christ? It's a lot, guys. I mean, not knowing, like, believing in something that you can't see, feel, or touch. I feel him, dude. I feel the Holy Spirit in me every day. Even when I'm doing wrong and I know doing stuff that I'm not supposed to be doing, I can feel the guilt. That's the Holy Spirit. When you feel the guilt telling you you're wrong and you shouldn't be doing that, that's the Holy Spirit telling you that, right? I'm hoping that you guys are getting something out of this book, right? Every week I'm going to go through them. I think I'm just going to read the chapters to you guys. I think it makes it a little bit easier and allows my episodes to go a little bit longer, right? But I mean, it's a good read. It's a very good book. Understanding what this disciple's going through, being a disciple of Christ, not knowing what that is like, not knowing what that looks like. Look, dude, this guy, he was 18 years old before he gave his life to God. There's a lot of people who are in their 40s giving their life to God. It takes all of us a little bit different times to say, hey, Lord, I'm done with this. I can't do it no more. I need you in my life. I need you to provide for me, God. And that's one thing. Have you made that decision yet? To be a follower of Christ? I'm hoping that these episodes, might jog you, might intrigue you a little bit to start thinking about it, right? Download the Bible app. Start reading the Bible. Start learning about these people that God talks about in the Bible. In the Bible, he used nothing but broken people, dude. Addicts, sex addicts, drug addicts, alcoholics, gamblers, tax collectors. He used a lot of people in this Bible, dude. Like, I'm telling you, man. I am telling you, man. Go and read it, dude. He used a lot of broken people like yourself. I'm just saying, man. Man, I appreciate you guys hanging out with me today on this Friday. Hopefully you guys get to enjoy your weekends. Football's finally here. Super excited. Get to watch some football on the weekends finally again. It's going to be good for the next few weeks, right? Got football back. And you can't get upset, man. The elections this year too, so we'll see how that goes, man. Like I said, if you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to hit that like, subscribe, and share button. Hit that notification bell, man, so you know when these new episodes come out on YouTube, man. If you're listening on iHeartRadio, Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher, wherever you listen to this podcast at, man, leave me a 5-star review. We got to get this content out there to our brothers and sisters, man. How many more brothers and sisters can we save, man? We already know how many people take their life every day, and it sucks, dude. It sucks. I mean, right now we're sitting here shooting this episode, and somebody's probably taking their life because they feel like there's no hope. There's hope out there. If you need somebody to talk to, reach out to me. I'll answer you. Call me on Facebook, Instagram, X, wherever you want to find me. Go, dude. Look, the swag, merch link in bio. Go get some swag, dude. You don't like this shirt? You don't think this shirt would be cool to wear around, right? I even got tank tops like this for females, too. Man, I appreciate you guys hanging out with me, enjoying this time together. Thank you for spending this Friday, man. Remember, see right here? Here's my puzzle. Here's my puzzle right here. Your piece goes right here, dude. You're very important. You're the only one that can do what you can do. Nobody else can do it. Only you can do it, man. I need you here. Don't ever feel like you're in the corner and there's nobody to listen to you, because I'll listen to you, dude. I'll listen to you. I'm here to help you, man. I love you guys. I appreciate you guys hanging out with me on this Friday, man. Take a listen to it. Hopefully it's something that you guys can enjoy, man. Hopefully we talked enough nonsense. Maybe to intrigue you, maybe to get your gears rolling in your mind, man. I love you guys so much, man. You guys are very much appreciated. You're very important to me, man. I love you guys. Remember, guys, hit the Stone Vet. We got you 6.
How it goes, I am the recipe, the food on the stove. I am above, I refuse to be below. I am important cause I am unique. I am the lesson, so learn it from me. I am the pavement made in the streets. I am the mercenary MRC.